Today on 52 Weeks of Why, I have a really cool guest that we literally have spent almost an hour talking before we actually hit the record button, and I'm really excited to introduce you to her. Before we roll, I have a very quick quote today, and this comes from Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill has a lot of really good quotes, but one of them that I really like, he talks a lot about hardships and how experiencing hardships, well, I'm going to do the quote rather than summarizing it. He says, your hardships are your blessings. Your personality flaws are your blessings. And your flaws are your blessings. And that an affliction can always be transmuted into a benefit. And if you know anything about Napoleon Hill and the way that he writes, it's always about your mindset, right? And how you view things. And if you view things in that negative manner, of course, they will always be negative. When you turn them around and change the way you look at them to a positive, it's amazing how the universe unfolds in front of you just by that change in mindset. So my guest today is an Olympic Gold Medalist, an outstanding entrepreneur and mindfulness coach, while also, of course, during the COVID era, taking care of 4 daughters and being a wife. I can only imagine what it's like managing school and work from home at the same time. So my guest is Samantha Livingstone. Samantha, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so grateful to spend this time with you. So thank you for having me.
So I want to I'm going to summarize some of this just in the interest of time, because Samantha's accomplished so much in her life and her goal orientation that us dialoguing about it like we did leading up to recording would be a very long episode. So I want to go through some of it, but I'm going to pause it at certain strategic areas where we spent some time just talking a little bit about the goal ambitions and things that got you to where you are today. And also a couple of those dark spots or hardships you had to overcome to get there. So I believe, were you born and raised in Massachusetts? Were you born there too?
Yes, in Salem, Mass. I joke with my daughters that I'm a witch.
Nice. So born and raised in Massachusetts, and went to high school also there in Peabody, Massachusetts. And the cool part, so how initially, understanding that you became very dedicated to swimming in your junior year, to the point where you were driving an hour away to a program that could help facilitate swimming, what got you the inclination that this was something that you could be a gold medalist at?
So, and this is true story. I think seeing glimpses of women on TV, and actually it was like the 92 Olympics, pay-per-view. You had to, like, my grandma ordered it on her TV to watch the games. And I saw a woman named Jenny Thompson, who was from just north of New Hampshire, swimming and competing. And it was that coupled with then watching the rise of the US women's national soccer team, because soccer was actually my first love, that I went to a showcase games, and saw Mia Hamm, who was another one of my idols, in person. And so it was this seeing and then listening to an Olympian in real time at a 10 and under banquet at a New England Championship banquet. And there she was, like this real human being that accomplished this thing. And so, as an 8-year-old, I would look out of my window every night, and I still do this when I see the first star in the sky, and I would make a wish, and I would imagine what would that feel like. The curiosity just filled me, and every part of me, of what would it be like. And then seeing these women do this thing, so there was always this deep curiosity that drove me, and we can get into the twists and turns and how that kind of morphed into something different. But that dream and desire to see just how far could I go, what would it be like up there? I think that was the initial pull for me as a young girl.
I remember this time because I was in it too, and I just remember that we had it was at the same time as the Dream Team, right? So while the Dream Team was going on, you also had these massive accomplishments that were being done by women, and it was very highly celebrated in the media. And it was the first time that you had seen women on the podium and portrayed in such a manner and talking about what they had done to accomplish that goal. So why then swimming?
Right, because my older brother did it. That's the true story. It was too hot to sit and watch. So I love the water. Water is home. I think, you've had Caroline on, and that was our mutual connection here. And it's a place where I feel free to be myself. There's something so magical about being in the water. And so I always loved swimming, and I loved soccer. And so the splitting of, saying goodbye for now to soccer and really concentrating on swimming was that I was, at 12 years old already at Y Nationals. So there was a certain level of ability that I had in moving through the water, that I could see that that was a path to my dreams. And now I know myself a lot more than I maybe was aware of back then, but there was also a higher level of control, and, making a team, getting playing time and all that, being part of team sports is very different in swimming. It was just you and the clock. That's it. And there was really nothing quote unquote that could get in your way. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's true of a lot of the swimmers that I've met. And I love swimming, but I didn't like swimming competitively because of that, because it was so self-isolated and it was so focused on you and these minor improvements that you could take. So you were good. It was something that you were natural at. There was this goal orientation to want to achieve the highest level that you could, so much so that you changed schools to go to a different program and drove an hour each way for your junior and senior year to do this. And then the transition coming out of high school and deciding to take a bye year and continue at that program, was the coach involved in that? What was the motivating factor behind not just finishing high school and going straight to college, but realizing that maybe I could accomplish this within the next 12 months?
Yeah. So can I back up just quickly?
Sure.
We want to stay the course. So the why, the real deep why underneath that transition was that at 14, I made the decision to stop soccer. And I was in an abusive coaching environment, and I was losing the love. And so the 96 games, so the 4 years later, I was watching Amanda Beard, who was 14, same age as me at the time, and feeling so far. I felt like my dream was just slipping away. And that I didn't have the language for the toxic environment that I was in. I didn't know what to do with those emotions. And so I shut down. And so my mom actually noticed and said, hey, what if we try this alternative? And that was, so the catalyst, while it was absolutely the next best step developmentally, like as an athlete, I would not have made it had I stayed there for a lot of reasons in that original club. But the driver of that was because the lights went out in me, and my mom wanted, she saw that, and we made that transition. So when I got there, I was at, in swimming, there's different tiers. So you have Y Nationals, and then you have, which is YMCA programs around the country. But then USA Swimming structure, you have junior nationals, regionals, and you get up to the junior national level. Now you're talking, a step down from senior nationals and a step down from trials. So within my first year, I had transferred to that team, and I was basically winning junior nationals. And now, a year later, placing on the podium at senior nationals, which, every 4 years is called Olympic trials. And so I could see how close I was, and the coach and other coaches around me who I trusted said, hey, what do you think about this? And that was hard for him because school was so important to me. I was, I graduated second or third in my class. Third, maybe. I don't even remember, but I know I was at the top. I wasn't first, I can tell you that. That's what I remember. Oh my gosh. Anyways, and I say that because that decision and him coming to me with that idea and then having the conversation with my parents was not made easily. So yeah. So I'll pause. Yes. So.
No, I think it's important to recognize the fact that the decision to switch schools wasn't just, I want to do better and be better. It was a negative reinforcement, something that you said I had to get away from, to move to a place where you could do the Olympics and be challenged to actually go. And so when you were in that year of training leading up to the Olympics, Like you said, it's a very individual sport, so you can see what your times are and you can see how you're improving. Are you in a position at the same time to be able to see who the competition is that you could potentially be facing in the Olympics and what their times are? And did you have a baseline based on that going into the Olympics of here's where I need to be in order to be on the podium and here's where I need to be first? And is that what drove you at that time?
It's so interesting you say that, because in the United States, to make the Olympic team is almost a harder, more challenging goal to meet than it is at the Olympics because of the depth of competition here. And so there's a massive hyper focus for trials. So and in how I approached it, and I bring this into my work as an entrepreneur, I have to consciously remember to do this, is to stay in my lane. So while it was important to know what people were going, I couldn't control how fast other people went. So we were, my coach, for example, would bring, the college season times, which were short course yards, which is the 25-yard distance versus 50-meter, very different swimming, very different as a competitor. And he'd bring the times for meets, and I just say throw them out. I don't care. I don't want to see them. It doesn't matter because I can't control that. It's not helpful to me. And so I was very motivated internally to pushing myself, to challenging myself, to pushing that edge of just how far, that question of just how far can I go? And it wasn't motivation for me. So I blocked all that out, truthfully. I got really good at that.
Isn't it funny how, like, literally you say staying in my lane, like you're literally staying in your lane. And I find it interesting that while those numbers existed, you were focused on your own self-improvement and trying to do the best that you could, and the results would feed themselves as a result of you doing that. So transitioning, going from that, and I want to be a good steward of your time, because I know we don't have as much time as I'd love to go through all of the details of this. Ultimately, you're in the Olympics and you're swimming. Was there a moment while you were experiencing this, before standing on the podium, where the realization came to you that you could be standing on the podium and in fact that you could be first?
Yeah. I think I dreamt about that moment, right, from being an 8-year-old girl. And so and this is the things when we were talking prior to coming on live, when you live it and then you read about it and you go, wait, hold on, I was doing this thing called visualization that I didn't have language for, to say I was visualizing and training my mind, that my mind had already been there. And so I think that there's one moment, as you were just talking right now, in warm up, being in that pool in the Sydney Natatorium, it was incredible. It was the most amazing experience and feeling. I know that's like, it's just a pool with water, but as an athlete at that level, the way that the water moved off the gutters, like there was just this moment when the stands were empty, but the lights were up and they were preparing for competition. It hadn't started yet. And where I just, I felt so connected, just so connected to the moment. And I think, so it was that moment of going, oh, like this is really happening. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that back, because it's been a while since I remembered that. Yeah.
Well, that's one of those this is it moments, right? This is it. I'm here. Yeah. This is the culmination of all of my work and all of my effort, and everything that I've done is now in this moment, right? Channeled into this moment. So I want to hit on the pinnacle, of course, of standing on the podium. But I also am wise enough to know that sometimes coming off of the podium, and learning what life is like after that is so important, and it's worth talking about, because almost every great athlete that I've met that has realized some pinnacle of success, I want you to share kind of immediately what happens after that, and then I want to kind of quickly go through the transition to collegiate sports, and moving from schools, and then ultimately I want to spend a little bit more time on where you are now as a mom and an entrepreneur and what you do for a living. But realizing, so we've arrived at this point where this is it. and you won and you're on the podium, and I want to talk about that pinnacle and that feeling, and then I want to go immediately to what happens next.
Yeah. So, like, where do you want to go? Do you want to talk about the drug testing that happens after? We can go wherever you want. Well, that moment. So, you know, what's so like, that's like one of my favorite memories was just prior to, and Jenny, who I had mentioned to you, was my inspiration in so many ways. I wanted to be like Jenny. She went to Stanford. She's on the front lines as a, like, you know, she talks about the work she's doing and the impact she's made as one of the most decorated Olympians. She's now on the front lines, as you know, fighting COVID. And I was the leadoff leg that night, followed by Diana Munz and Lindsay Benko, and then Jenny anchored. And so for me, that moment was like everything. And so, you know, once you finish, you haven't warmed down, your muscles are all shaking. You're in the ready room getting ready to do the award ceremony. And so, and those are the moments actually that bring me they light me up with such joy. And it's not that the moment, you know, listening to our national anthem was in any way, you know, not exciting and not, it was just both. It was this moment of, I was exhausted and relieved and so proud, and I could see my mom in the stands. And also at the same time, it was nothing like I had imagined it would be. And so there was this rumbling that was happening inside. And since I've started to talk about this experience to so many other athletes that have experienced this, that say, oh, yeah. And you feel like you have to hide it after, and you feel like you have to live up to what you think people think it should be. And so there's this really interesting spinny space that you get to. And it's the moments literally before stepping up and trying, you know, waiting for Jenny to get herself ready to come march out for the parade. And they're threatening us, like, if you don't come now, you're not going on TV. Like, you know, those are the moments that you're like, those moments of connection with your teammates, that we did this thing together, compared to this idea of what it was supposed to be like, and then feeling like you're constantly falling short. And so standing atop the podium, I just remember the medal was way heavier than I thought it was going to be. And then I was like, okay, I have to make sure I sing these words right, because if I don't, then we're going to get in trouble. Like, so, you know, so that moment, I think the moment is so much bigger than that, what you see on TV. And that drives me, you know, which is why we're here talking about our why. And so following that, when the lights went out, again, the lights went out in me, though they weren't. There's always a light in us. I truly believe that, but it was pretty dim. And so I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I was supposed to act. I was really just completely covered in that perfectionist armor and felt like a prisoner. And I felt like I had to put on this mask and act a certain way, because that's what people expected me to do. And so that is a way, you know, when you put on your mask and are always trying to act in a way that people think you should act, it just leads to the constant never enoughness. And so, you know, and ending up at the massive transition of coming off that moment and really being unsupported. Truthfully, I'll just call it what it is. And I do work with USA Swimming now, and I do pay forward and try to help change that culture. But too many times, and it's not just swimming, we have all the supports in the front end, and then post Olympics, it's like, you know, thanks for the medal count. We got that on the wall. Like, we did it. Your headlines of all the newspapers, you're in Sports Illustrated, I'm on the Today Show, like all these things. And then what? And then you go, who am I? Like, who am I? I'm still me. And I have this thing, and I have this new title. And now that changes the way that people interact with me. And so my response to that was, I'm just going to shove it down. Like, I just want to hide that. I don't want to tell people. I don't want to talk about it. I want them to see me and know me before they judge me. So yeah, there's a lot there.
It's crazy how for some people it's almost like this moment that you've spent your whole life working towards, that was supposed to be this thing that you would never get tired of talking about, becomes the thing that you never want to talk about again. That you put in a box, and if anybody comes at you and the first thing they want to talk about is that, it's immediately a shutdown. Where leading up to that, you meeting the gold medalist, Jennifer, as an example, the first thing you want to do is, I want to talk about this because it's so important to me and I want to learn from you. And you don't realize that it mentally and emotionally, it can be such a challenging thing not, of course, not the act of winning and the act of receiving the award, but what happens mentally and emotionally after that. So you came out of that at some point. Well, you had an obligation coming out of that to go into collegiate sports. So you had, I don't want to say you had no choice, but you had an obligation to go to college and compete in swimming at the collegiate level. And you did that. And you did that both in Athens, right?
So I arrived in
Ann Arbor
and transitioned to Athens, Georgia. Yes.
And so going from Ann Arbor to Georgia, there was another Pinnacle that happened in Georgia, another moment that should be a dramatic celebration, another pinnacle of success. And I want to lead into that, and then I want to kind of transition out of the titles and the gold medals and talk a little bit about your move and motherhood and becoming a mom and a wife. But we can't skip over winning the national title, because I know how important that was for the team. How did you go from the mental place that you were in to going to Ann Arbor and competing again and being a teammate again, and then going to Georgia and helping that team win the national title, and talk same sort of conversation about what that felt like, and then what it felt like when you were done?
Sure. So that was, arriving at the University of Michigan, you go from being literally, and I came with a cohort. I wasn't alone. There was a group of us Olympians that were competed in Sydney, all sports, that arrived in Ann Arbor. And the way that it timed, because they're Southern Hemisphere, the Summer Olympics were in September. And so I was like half into the semester, reduced course load, and just, missing all the beginning of the year normal transition stuff that helps that transition. Also coming with this new title, newspapers wanting to interview, all the things. So it was extremely difficult. And I felt, now I know I was ill prepared because I was fumbling, and I was just fumbling my way through. And that ended up, me reaching for all the things that I could control. I ended up navigating, weaponizing food and navigating an eating disorder. I was the darkest when it comes to just the journey with mental illness, was battling, a clinical depression and suicidal ideation. I was in extreme pain from an injury that I had put off and had been managing. And then when I came into they're already in their season, and I'm like, I gotta keep up. Like, I've got to be me. I've got to be this, this Olympic gold medalist. So I have to, instead of just easing into practices, just destroyed my shoulder. I mean, it was already hard. And then I just jumped right into practices instead of easing in, and I hurt myself. And so within 2 months, the surgeon was saying to me, you need to get out of the water. Like, you can no longer swim. So for me, it's like the place, my happy place, my place I cope, and now I can't even do that. And so it in a way, like you started with such a beautiful quote, because it's everything. It says everything that I'm trying to say with so succinctly, because that struggle led me to the office of Greg Harden, and through his mentorship and through his work, we worked together every single week for 2 years on the inside of me and my identity and who I am and my mental and emotional well-being. And he saw me, and he helped me find the tools to heal. And he's the one that introduced me to mindfulness. And so when I came out with a physically healed shoulder and healed spirit, healed soul, and transferred to Ann Arbor, it was just a completely different experience. At that point, the work I had to do was in the pool. And so, or when I transferred to Athens from Ann Arbor. So having come off that time with Greg and being in Michigan, really healing my insides, was able to experience the top of that podium. So our first year, at 3 years of eligibility, we got second at NCs. Then the next year we got second to Auburn both times. And so you better believe that I was not going to get second again. It wasn't me. That's the thing, is that it took all 30 of us to come together. And that was so beautiful and powerful and hard and messy, and we did it. And so on that podium, I was able to walk around being freely myself. And so it feels funny to say that was the highlight, if you had to force me to choose one, of my career. I was, my insides matched my outsides. So that experience for me, I could talk about for days. And I know we don't have days, so.
Well, and I think, again, it's so amazing to hear how the support piece going into and coming out of the Olympics, how it being different going into and coming out of collegiate sports. You were so much more mentally prepared for what was coming to you and what was coming after, that it makes perfect sense to me why that would be such a pinnacle relative to, if you compare one to the other, right? Because the mental place you were in was so much better and so much more healthy. So you came out of that winning the national title, and became a teacher and taught science for high school level students, and became a mom. And shortly after becoming a mom, had to move and leave Georgia and come back home, we'll call it what home is today. And that transition of coming back home and not working anymore, and having a newborn and filling your time, obviously you had to be in a good mental place then in order to make that change and transition and support your husband and the career that he had chosen moving back home. And then your twins were born, who changed your life.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. And so I'm jumping ahead. There's so much more we could talk about in that space that I just summarized, but we have to discuss one of the issues that you had with one of your twins when she was a baby. And hopefully we can both work our way through this without getting teary. And then how you came out of that and your career today. And then we can talk about your why, because I know this is a critical component in that.
Completely. So so new mom, so Kylie was 2 years old when we had our twins, my oldest. And so that was like, we were joking ahead of time. It's like teaching with 3, like my plan was to potentially go back into the classroom. And then it was like, okay, now there's 3. And 9 months actually into their life, and new rumbling with perfectionism, because giving twins exactly what they want at the same time was like the universe's joke. And then we were hit with the news that Mia needed open heart surgery, and she was born with a hole in her heart that we went undetected throughout the pregnancy. And so it was like, everyone kept saying, oh, it's just, okay, it's a hole. We do this all the time. Okay, it's a routine procedure. A couple days in the hospital. And it ended up being actually at this exact moment, right, 7 years ago, she went in for surgery a week before Thanksgiving and was in the hospital through the new year. And, the first few weeks, the first week especially, was the most brutal time of my life, hands down. And I hope it's like a parent's worst nightmare. I was present with her post-op. I'd spent the night, and her heart failed after the surgery. So successful surgery, and then her heart failed, and she spent a week on life support. And that week, it sounds so, maybe it doesn't sound bizarre to those that know the space, but I was brought back to the times that I was training for the Olympics, when I didn't know if I could go any further, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I just took one literal step at a time. And that was the place that I had to go back to, that I found, like almost this place of returning to going, okay, this feels familiar. What do I do here? It's like one foot in front of the other, because I literally couldn't control what was happening outside of me, other than meeting with the chaplain and this, end of life care team that's a horde of people. And, you stand bedside in what they call like this, they don't call it this, it's like the slang term, but like the sick bay, where the doctors have their eye on your kid all the time. And, in the most brutal moment, I shake when I tell you this, it was also the most beautiful, because it was like seeing the way that the nurses arranged her little loveys and animals. She's fighting for her life, and the care that they're taking to treat her with such love and support and hold space for us as we hold hope, while the machines and the technology are telling us that it doesn't look good. The doctor, her surgeon, still holding space for us and allowing us to choose hope. And there was just something, I'm forever grateful for the entire, like everyone from the secretary on and at Children's Hospital in Boston, because, you know, I just, any parent that rumbles with that experience or has to face that, even imagining it as a parent is one of the hardest things. And so coming out of that, you know, we didn't know if we would leave with her. And so leaving physically leaving with her in the stroller was so powerful and symbolic. And that's actually similar to that podium moment for me, because it was when I got home that I literally crumbled and was trying to take care of my, you know, 3 kids under 3, infant, you know, these newborns, not newborns, but little tiny twins, one of them who needed medicine literally every 2 hours, round the clock in the middle of the night to survive. And so that's where like the lights fade, the support staff's not there, the social worker's not checking on you, and you're just like, okay, now what? And that's again where I turned to, I reached out and got a therapist, and we have been meeting ever since, literally 7 years, because she helped me heal similar to Greg and, you know, find my way through trauma, which was new for me, and healing through trauma. And doing that allowed me to go back to that 18-year-old self and stretch it even further back to that 15-year-old, 13-year-old self who was in that traumatic, abusive environment. And so, you know, that moment, I would never wish it on anyone. And also that moment was what literally broke me open and has set me free, I say, to living and anchoring myself to what matters most. And, you know, moving away from this constant chasing of titles and doing to living a life of fulfillment, which for the past 7 years, you know, the first few, I was really like rumbling and going, okay, can you still achieve if you settle, right? If you lean into the space of abundance and sufficiency, are you gonna just stop growing? And that was a fear of mine. And I know now that actually growth happens when we do settle, when we come to this place of, and when I say settling, I mean coming into the present moment and being awake to what's in front of us. So yeah, I know there's a lot there.
Well, I think the one thing for me is the takeaway is, you know, you come out of something that's already a very emotionally and physically trying situation, which is having a child. Mm-hmm. And you're already in a challenged emotional state, right? Mm-hmm. Both with an extreme high of here's my child and holding your child and loving your child. That also opens up to a lot of vulnerability, and knowing that your heart is now wrapped around this child, and then having to go through the child's near-death experience, and come out of that. I mean, there's just talk about peaks and valleys and roller coasters of emotions that are all due to things that are out of your control. I think the strongest mindset person in the history of the world would have a hard time coping with that emotional roller coaster. And so now it's just so interesting to me that now you find yourself as a mindfulness coach, mm-hmm. helping Olympians, helping other individuals in sports, helping people who experience the same ups and downs and peaks and valleys that you experienced specifically in sports, but also on a personal level with Mia. And did that happen just naturally? Was it like, okay, I can literally go and talk to other students who went through the same thing I did, and maybe in conversation telling them what you experienced, and the light bulb went on for them, you realized that, oh man, I could do this, and I could do this on a scale, and I could do this as a career? Was that a moment of realization, or was that something that somebody came and told you?
It was a slow, hard, messy, organic unfolding. So I'm like, there was no, I don't know, maybe it happens that way for some. Well, it did for me when I was younger, right? Like I had this spark and it was just like so clear and vivid. No, not at all in this way. this was, this was a process of I've got to heal myself. And so in doing that, I know now that one of the things that Greg, who, was my mentor in college, he sent me out when I was so battling depression. I mean, depression had me gripped. I didn't want to get out of bed. He sent me to this elementary school outside of Detroit to go volunteer. And I'm like, okay, I can't even brush my teeth. Like, what am I doing here? And it gave me purpose. I actually changed my major. I was pre-med. Like, that was my goal, right? And I was like, nope, education's where it's at. So I knew in the core of me, that knowing that pouring into others, that helping others was going to give me a purpose, because obsessing over medicine and trying to find the FedEx truck and making sure deliveries were on time was just all consuming and not serving me. And Mia's doctor, her cardiologist, who still to this day we see, says to me all the time, almost in a threatening way, but not really. She's the most amazing human. She's just like, you will let her be a kid. You will let her be a kid. You will let her do kid things. And so what that means is then I've got to figure out a way to be in this moment, because if I try to go out there, or I'm ruminating over what happened here. And so mindfulness, not only was it a tool that my therapist was engaging me in and having me use, it's the same, same skill set Greg introduced me to, when I healed that first time. And then I was rumbling with this idea, like I'd mentioned, like, can you get to this top of this podium? Can you be great and also be healthy? And so I'm taking courses. And so it was like this simultaneously like healing. And I kind of live by this guidepost of I don't write or share with you or any, in any public forum until I've healed. And I say that not as if there's a finish line, but so that I'm not pouring from an open wound, and I'm sharing from what I've learned. And until I can do that, I kind of keep doing the work. So as I would do the work, I'd drip out a little bit, and the responses back, I think, is what surprised me. And then watching 2016 Rio Games unfold with the behavior of athletes and this, like, the arrest of the swimmers and this like international scandal happening, that was when I didn't share this with you, and I'm not sure if you read it somewhere, but you said box things away. I literally did that. So all my Olympic boxes were buried. And in 2016, with 4 curious girls and watching what's happening unfold in Rio, rumbling with these questions, having shared, and people are saying, oh my gosh, me too. I unboxed all of those things and inside found my journal. And that was the moment for me when I read how sick I was, that I went, oh my gosh, I was so sick. And I know now that even teens today who are struggling with the pandemic, who are wondering, they just, the inner critic is, you're not sick enough to get help. Like, it's not that bad. Like, you're not that sick. Like, your eating issues aren't that bad. And there's that space. And so for me, it was seeing my words as a mom, watching my girls dress themselves in all these clothes and put medal upon medal on, and going, what happens? Like, how does this young girl, like these young girls in front of me, what happened? What happened? And what can we do differently so that does not happen? So you get me all fired up.
I love that you got fired up. I love that this is something that like you can tell there's so much passion, especially witnessing other people experiencing it and then having the opportunity to share it with your daughters. And I feel the same pull as you, in that there's experiences that I've gone through that if I can help another person not have to go through them by sharing knowledge with them, then I feel I have an obligation, right? There was a friend of mine who got me involved in the Rotary, told me that where there is an ability, there is a responsibility. And those words resonated with me. They echoed in my head for days after he said them, because I felt that I had an ability. And I think that so many people have an ability, whether it's monetarily or physically or emotionally or mentally. There's an ability there that they've refined, and it does lead to a responsibility to help, whether it's adults who are going through the same thing or kids who are about to experience the same thing. And your passion for that comes through just in the way that you talk about it, and the way that you your eyes light up when you're experiencing the moment of that responsibility and that awakening and that change. So we spent all of this time leading up to your why, and I want you, in the interest of time, to share with us your why and take us home. And I want to thank you for your time and for being here today. And I know that we'll be talking again soon.
Oh my goodness. Oh, the why. So this, and I purposely didn't prepare because I wanted to see what came up. And what comes up for me is, again, it's just this reoccurring theme as I do this work. And you brought me back to that moment with my girls. And why? So that no really human, I do my work in the athletic arena, but feels alone and broken. So that athletes feel seen and safe and supported. So there's this deep pull to help, and this gets into kind of the what, but to help equip this with the tools and the skills in order to allow for our greatness that exists inside all of us to unfurl, to come through. And, a huge part of this work, as someone that navigates mental illness, even to this day, right? This is part of my story. It weaves in and out, right? We all have highs and lows. This idea of othering those that navigate mental illness and substance use issues, and so that's another deep layer to this, is that the humanization, and that we are humans, that humans struggle, and that is okay. And we can build the tools that we need in order to move through the struggle. And that pain isn't something that we have to run from, that we can turn toward it and mine the wisdom, and it doesn't define us. And when we sit with that, we also then have to say, what else doesn't define us? These top high level podium moments, that we are humans who are doing these extraordinary things and having these extraordinarily hard experiences, but at the end of the day, that we are loved exactly as we are. So yeah, I don't know that answers your question, but why? Because we are worthy and we are enough exactly as we are. Yeah.
You really, I hear the words of so many great philosophers and life coaches and books that I've read coming out of your mouth as you say all of that. That it's really cool. I can tell that you're studied in this regard, and that you take it seriously, and that it is your work, and that it is your passion, not just because of the way you say it, but because of the words you choose to use and the way that you articulate it. And I think Jim Rohn has a saying that talks about, it's not about the goal. It's not about what you get. It's about what you become on the way to accomplishing that. And it's about who you become in the midst of accomplishing the goal. And your story exemplifies that. Your story shares that so well that you realized the goal. But the first time you realized the goal, what you had become along the way, didn't allow you to appreciate the levity of it, and didn't allow you, in the same sense as winning the national title coming out of college, who you had become in accomplishing that goal was so much bigger and so much better, and has translated in who you became going through the process that you went through with Mia and her health conditions. It's amazing. Your story's amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. If anyone wants to follow you or hear more, I'm sure they do, because if they're like me, we've skimmed the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we can talk about. How can people hear more or subscribe to a blog or find you on social media? And I'll let you take us home.
Sure. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for holding space and allowing this conversation to unfurl in the way that it did. I appreciate that. And I love, as I share with you, love diving deep. So follow me on social media. I think if you share this on Facebook, you can tag Samantha Arsenault Livingstone. And I have it's, the /S Livingstone Wellness on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. If you go, the easiest place is probably just to go to my website, which is SamanthaLivingstone.com. And there you can find my social handles. I have my blog that's over there. And I have a TEDx also that's out, and it's embedded on onto my speaking page on my website. And that is, I love the questions that you ask, though. I just have to share that, like the way that you ask, because I get asked a lot of questions, to do a lot of podcasts and interviews, and it's really such an incredible experience when they're pulled together in a way that feels new. And so thank you for that. Really well done. I appreciate this. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much. And thank you for being here. I appreciate it.